Hiya, Squirt. So today I'm bringing you breaking news. You heard it here first, coming right from the horse's mouth. That's me, I'm a horse now. And that is that the rumors are true that Nintendo, yes, that is right, Nintendo, the most selfless and benevolent corporate entity of all time, who is also my best friend, is making, guess what, another Mario game. I know this is hard to believe since Mario is pretty niche, but apparently Tendo, I can call them Tendo because we're best friends, is taking a big swing on our boy in blue and making a full-blown Mario game, exclusively for the Nintendo Switch 2. Insider sources are also saying they might even implement a feature where he can jump and or make a sound that goes like, "Oh, mamma mia." Some reports are also saying in this game he might have a gun. So, recently you may have heard about this notion going around that Nintendo has abandoned their creativity with the Switch 2. This sentiment was popularized after the big reveal when a certain former PlayStation boss said on a certain video game podcast that, quote, Nintendo is losing their identity when asked about his thoughts on the Switch 2 presentation. Amidst the controversy of pricing, game keycards charging $10 for what looks like an underwhelming pack-in title, and above all, perhaps the most iterative hardware update we've ever seen from a next-gen Nintendo console, it's easy to see why this argument caught on with so many people. And I'm certainly not going to convince you otherwise if you are a staunch believer in Nintendo's regression as a company, but I do want to take a historical view on what defines Nintendo's identity for so many people, because the truth is, people have been debating it for years. When the Wii U was out, people were saying, man, this isn't the Nintendo I know and love. The Nintendo I know and love was making little plastic car wheels and calling me obese in front of my family.
That's obese.
During the GameCube generation, people were saying, this isn't Nintendo. If this were really Nintendo, they'd still be making SNES games. Then, back during the SNES, people were saying, the real Nintendo wouldn't be making some bunk-ass bullshit like this. The real Nintendo I know and love was hosting hibachi nights for the Shogun back during feudal-era Japan. The thing is, for the past 20 or so years, Nintendo has defined itself by the featured gimmicks of their hardware. You got the motion controls, the controller with the screen, the 3D, the fucking alarm clock, and, of course, the handheld hybrid. The system's raw processing power has never been the focus for Nintendo, at least not for a long time, because in that department, they usually get smoked. But putting less juice in these turkey legs often makes for cheaper production, which has informally led to Nintendo being known as the budget option for console gamers. It's also known as the option for gamers in diapers, but joke's on you, because that means that those gamers are also breastfeeding. Cut to the Switch 2, a console that is entirely iterative, literally just a more powerful Switch 1, and an expensive one at least relative to other Nintendo consoles at launch. Plus, you have this whole marketing push of Switch 2 having a 4K output, a 1080p HDR screen, having 120 FPS, and also a variable refresh rate. Oh wait, sorry, that last one was a lie, sorry about that. And these are all decent specs for sure, especially for a hybrid system, but people said the same thing about the Switch 1 when it launched, and that thing can't even run basic Skyrim mods, much less the mod to my former marriage where I signed a prenup. This system, like all systems, will eventually be outpaced by the software it's running, but I have this funny feeling deep in my cannons that this will happen for the Switch 2 sooner rather than later. Do you know I'm still gonna be in there day one playing Tears of the Kingdom and thanking the good God up above for the bountiful frame rate he has blessed us with, just like every other freak who has a Zelda tattoo. All this to say, I can see why one would say that Nintendo lost their identity with the Switch 2 just by looking at the hardware alone, because they're breaking their typical innovative, gimmicky mold by, ironically, just doing more of the same. But that's just the hardware, baby, and if you know Nintendo, you know it's all about the software. That's right, it's in the game. Now, the way Nintendo differs from the other console manufacturers is that they actually care about having good exclusives, which is why we're best friends. But as the wise guru of Microsoft once said, good games don't sell consoles. Using your Kinect to watch Family Feud sells consoles. Just look at the Wii U. The biggest flop in Nintendo history, yet the first-party library on this thing is untouchable. So what happened? This was easily the most affordable console of the big three, and it had a big, fat Fisher-Price leapfrog-looking ass gimmick to stick the landing, too. Arguably Nintendo at their most true to form. But the catch is, a console's gimmick can either distract the consumer from its flaws or accentuate them. And this was a lesson that Nintendo had to learn the hard way. Twice. So, is it fair to say that Nintendo is losing their identity solely based off playing it safe this generation by adopting the if it ain't broke, don't fix it mentality and slapping a big fat 2 on the box? No, I don't think so. In my opinion, Nintendo is defined by their games. Because when you have the games, you get the dames, which I'm pretty sure is a quote from Adam Sandler in Pixels. So, how are the games on the Switch 2? Based off the gameplay I've watched so far, I'd say they're shaping up to be a fun time. Donkey Kong, in particular, looks like something I could really sink my teeth into. But I'm also a bit biased, because if you know me, you know I love me some Diddy. If there's one thing that gives me slight pause, I'd say it's the homogenization of the art direction in these games. That's not to say either of these are bad-looking titles. In fact, they look fantastic. But something I've been noticing as of late is how all these new Nintendo games all seem to have a similar looking color palette. It's kind of like this cartoony, pastel, one-size-fits-all type of look, falling in line with this corporate image of wacky family fun that they're known for. And I think it worked great for Mario and Animal Crossing and Kirby and Pokemon and Zelda, and you see what I'm getting at? But now let's look back on what we got on a system like the Wii, an underpowered shit machine that can't even run a calculator app. That's all to say, these games both look gorgeous, but I'd love to see some bigger risks in the art department down the road. And that brings me to my final examination of this whole identity crisis topic. The risks that Nintendo is willing to take. Obviously, from a hardware perspective, there isn't one. They basically just bred a Switch and a PS4, and boom, Bob's your uncle, Bob in this case being a PlayStation Vita. But that gimmick/innovation philosophy that Nintendo is known for with their consoles also extends to, you guessed it, their games. Nintendo is infamous for not giving fans the things they wanted, like a hyper-realistic Zelda game where Link smokes weed and says cool words like fuck and ass, but rather giving fans the things they didn't even know they wanted, like a cel-shaded Zelda game where Link is practically a toddler and he's also a wee little sailor, and instead of saying fuck, he goes oh, and it's also one of the best games of all time and still somehow looks amazing. Now, before the Switch 2 presentation, what was the safest bet people were predicting we'd see? New 3D Mario. Obviously, that's what usually leads the new generation, and that would have been the easiest layup for Nintendo. And yet what we actually got was completely different. First 3D Donkey Kong in over 20 years with a new fracking mechanic? That's the kind of unexpected left field move I'd expect from Nintendo. Plus a teaser for a new Kirby Air Ride, which confirms that Sakurai has finally been released from the Smash Chamber. Whether or not these titles stick the landing remains to be seen, but in my opinion, the heart of Nintendo's identity is the games. If they keep making timeless classics by finding new ways to innovate their game mechanics, I don't think we'll have anything to worry about. And if they don't, then at least we can all say they innovated how much we're all willing to pay for Mario Kart.